Good evening and welcome. You passage in Luke, but tonight, due to the situation, we have something a little different. Western Hills. And Chris Stephens, who's the minister of the Avenue G, about the situation and about how you and I, as followers of Jesus and believers, and Scott Meyer.
Welcome. I'm glad you're joining us from wherever you might be joining us. My name is Scott Meyer, and it's been my privilege to serve as the lead minister at the Western Hills Church of Christ in Temple, Texas. And this is Chris Stephens, and he's the lead minister for the Avenue G Church of Christ.
Yes, sir.
And
yes, sir.
We've had a chance to develop a friendship, and it's been very transforming to me. First of all, I admire Chris and his church and the things that God's doing through him, and you and everything, and a beautiful family, by the way.
Thank
and
you.
if you know Chris, you know the update. He's got 3 lovely daughters, and number 4 on the way. Real quickly, So your life is in fast motion right now.
Most definitely. It's scary.
Well, excited for that. With everything going on in our country right now, with the videos, the violence, the protests, Chris and I have had an ongoing conversation even before the recent events with George Floyd. We've been talking about what's it mean to both be Christians and to come at Christianity or following Jesus from our particular race or our particular ethnic group. And it seemed appropriate for us to get together once again in light of the very current situations going on right now. Protests are going on around the world in response to the video, the very difficult video to watch from George Floyd up in Minneapolis. And so, Chris, I'm glad we get to have this conversation. That's what this is. This is a conversation. This isn't me interviewing you or you interviewing me. We're going to talk. And we're going to try to put in some practice and hopefully have something helpful for those that are listening to us, and particularly those that also claim to follow Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what we got to put the focus on, is that we're looking at this from the perspective of people who follow Jesus. When we try to tie in anything else, that's where the lines get blurred, and that's where we start to make mistakes. So I think that's important, that when we engage, like as we are engaged in the conversation, I guess you can look at what we're doing and say, hey, this is how we should talk to each other. Not how we're doing here, this is how you need to have conversations out there as well. Listening, waiting, hearing what the other person has to say, reasoning together. So.
One of the things you said when you started that was, let's listen, let's engage in conversation, and not all the other stuff that ties and gets brought in.
Yeah.
Just as we begin to get going, what other things do you see that get brought in that muddy the conversation, or muddy it's really not even called a conversation out or it's a shouting match in many ways. So what are the things that you see, the dynamics that get brought in that so cloud this and make it difficult to do what we're doing?
All right, so I think that one thing that clouds and really escalates things quickly is our emotions, right? We know that it's not a sin to be angry, but we also know that we are not supposed to sin in our anger. And I believe that based on the things that we've seen here recently and over the years, it's very easy to tie what we see to emotion and then act from that emotion without really thinking. There is a history of things like we've seen with George Floyd, right? We've seen it in newspapers, we've seen it in magazines, now we're seeing it recorded on video. And there's a lot of times whenever this thing is tied to the history. I didn't know if we wanted to get into the history of things, but what I wanted to do, as I've explained before, is that the history that we've and I'm talking about black people in America, have experienced is one that is that has been poison. I believe I would say it's been poison. You look at the history of black people in America from 1619, right?
Well, and why don't we do talk about the history? Because to answer your question, and when we set it up this way, because I think that I watched the George Floyd video, and it's hard to watch. And I'm watching it going, why would they do that to a person? But I don't tie it to anything else. I'm focused on what is a difficult, obviously a horrendous situation, a tragedy, but when I watch it, I'm not connecting the dots to anything else. I'm watching a video that in that moment I know that should not be happening. But that may not be your perspective from you, or maybe a different perspective from a someone that's black watching it. Try some of those dots, and I think that goes into the history
it
that you're
does.
describing. So with that setup, take it over and help us understand.
As soon as you see it, as soon as you see that image there, you're saying, well, what I'm saying to myself is not again, right? I'm saying this is, here we go again. You also may think to yourself that, okay, nothing's going to be done about this. History has shown that nothing's going to be done. Enslaved people brought to a whole nother continent, 1619, slavery begins, whatever, right? Then you have 1865, you're free, Emancipation Proclamation, all that stuff, you're free, but you're not really free, right? You're not really free. There's vagrancy laws to where, okay, if you're homeless, of course, slaves that were set free, they're homeless.
Automatically homeless.
You're going back to jail. You're going into a system where you're going to be doing the same thing you were doing before, sharecropping, same thing. 1965, 100 years later, hey, you guys are citizens, you can vote. Not really. You know, there's this hint of equality, and then it's like, here, we're going to take this back, right? This thing continues to go on and on, Jim Crow and all these things, and you see this history, you see things get better, and then it's like it was just a mirage. And you see things like that, and it's like, okay, this is Emmett Till all over again. This is the outcome of the Emancipation Proclamation again. This is, okay, where's the 40 acres and a mule type thing? It's just like, where's our freedom? And to see it happening, and now you have video evidence, and you show people, and they say, you say that black people's lives matter and black lives matter, and then the response is all lives matter. It's just like, there's a disconnect there. It's just like, I feel as though I'm invisible. I feel as though I'm screaming at the top of my lungs and nobody can hear me, right? I have evidence of what I'm going through and nothing is being done about it. So you see that, and it's just like, yes, black people are in a much better position than they were in at that time. And now I believe that the ones who are stepping up are saying, okay, I'm not my grandma, I'm not my grandpa, I'm going to do something about it. But sometimes the anger that is felt, I believe, attached to the history causes people to respond in ways that are not right. Violence, looting, things of that nature. Because it's just like, I have this pent up stuff inside of me, and I'm ready to explode, right?
So coming from my perspective, I watch a video individually that's hard to watch, but again, I'm not connecting it. And coming from your perspective, or perhaps the perspective of a black person watching the video, it's automatically immediately connected to a long, and I like that. I like how you described it, a pent up something. You know, and because I think you said your first response was, oh no, here it is again. Or something to that effect of here we go. Here we go again.
Most definitely. It's like it's 401 years of here it is, here's equality, not really. And it's just like, for me, because I don't feel like I've experienced the same type of racism that my grandparents did. You know, they seen something totally worse than what I've seen. My great grandmother told me stories about what she's seen. I haven't experienced that. So just imagine the people that experienced that, and then they're seeing videos. And it's just like, back then they only heard about it or read about it in newspapers, and they're seeing it, and nothing's changing for them. So people are mad, and upset about it.
Well, I think that's definitely powerful because our experiences definitely drive us. Our experiences shape us. And you and I have been having an ongoing conversation for a long time. And so let me take you back to one of our conversations we had at McAllister's.
Yeah.
And it was early on. And I asked you, what do I miss? I'm a white pastor, a white preacher here in town. You're a black preacher here in town. So what do I miss just because I don't have some of the same experiences? And you gave me some very insightful stuff, and it was very tangible. And do you remember what we talked about the experience of the restaurants? And So let me let you share that again. We've shared it in some other venues, but I think that's important because I know for me that was so like I'm going, I don't have that experience, and so there is at least somewhat of a gap we've got to be listening through between us.
So I shared with Scott some stories that my grandparents were telling me about how they used to go to this burger joint downtown Temple, right? And he explained it.
And these are your grandparents?
Yes, my grandma and grandpa, Samuel Blocker and Evelina Blocker, right? They're talking about how they would go downtown and they would go to this burger place, but they had to go around to the back door in order to be served, and they would just explain these things to me, and I'm just like, first, I don't know why, but I never thought my grandparents would. I know how old they are, but I didn't think that they were that old to go that far back for some reason. But I'm just like, man, that's odd that they connect to that. My grandma was telling me also about how when my mom was born, they wanted her to have my mom in the basement of the hospital. They didn't want her to be born on the regular floor of the hospital. And you hear stories like that, and then I talk to you also about the talks that we have to have with our children. Me as a young man, you get to talk about how to respond to police officers, and it's just like, don't give them a reason, be cautious, don't move too quickly, tell them, narrate your actions, things like that.
So that's real world for you. Growing up, you were given a talk about how to be responsive, how to be appropriate, not just to be respectful, but how to stay alive. That was the motivation for the talk, right? Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a huge gap between our experiences that somebody in my situation needs to know and understand.
Right. So me receiving that talk from my father, I believe that it was something that everybody did, right? Until we had a discussion and other people have talked about it. I thought it was something that everybody did, right?
It's just, no matter who you
across
are,
the board,
any color, this is, at some point you have the talk, once about the birds and bees, and then once about how to respond to police.
It's just like you get this talk, either keep your hands on the steering wheel, turn the car off. If you have to, maybe hold them outside the window, the keys or whatever. Whenever you're about to move, when you go for your wallet, tell them what hand you're reaching with, where you're going to reach for it. Move slowly, things like that. That's the talk that we get. And I just thought that was normal, And
your grown-up experience was normal.
Yeah, it is.
It is normal.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful because the talk that I give to my kids about when it comes time for them to drive, when you get pulled over by a police officer, be sure you pull far enough off the road that you don't impede oncoming traffic.
Yeah. So it's a bit different. Huh?
It's a totally different deal. And I think that's pretty eye-opening to me because you thought it was normal to have the talk. I had no idea that there was another talk, growing up.
Yeah.
And I just assumed that this is how it is. And so this isn't about police bashing. This is just about you start from a whole different place than when I start from. And those assumptions, those experiences are ingrained in there.
Yeah. And I think we just assume that everybody's experience is the same. That's why when we see a video, we think your response is supposed to be the same as my response. And I think that's where the blurred lines happen. So one of the things I want to ask is when you saw it, you said that you're seeing something, you know that it shouldn't be happening, right? That, like you've already explained, that's not something that the average black person, I guess you could say, I don't want to be like Joe Biden or something, say you're not black if you don't feel this way. But it's just like most black people, they see that. That's what they're attaching it to history there.
So
a frustrating history. Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, when I see it, I'm not connecting all the dots. I'm watching a single individual tragedy and going, man, that's a shame.
Yeah.
And again, when you saw it, the phrase was, "Here we go again."
Yeah.
And that subtle difference is not insignificant. I mean, there's a huge
there's a difference
trajectory that puts us on. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and let's talk about this one. This may be a little hot topic-ish for our discussion, but some of the phrases come out. Black Lives Matter, and again, when I watch it, I naturally say, "Oh man, that's a life. That matters. All lives matter." Why is that not helpful for me to say something like that?
Well,
from your perspective.
From my perspective, I think that when I hear something, like that, it's just what I hear when someone may say all lives matter is mine doesn't, right? And it's not.
And that's very interesting. Unpack that for us a little bit. I think you're onto something.
So I think it's akin to, you have the symbol, right? Olympics, the athletes,
the power,
yeah, Black Power thing. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't like Black supremacy. It's just saying Black Power. Like you have the ability to do something. You have purpose to. You have worth to. It's something where you're trying to build some pride in who you are, right? And I think a lot of times Black people are people may look at Black pride as something as someone saying I'm better than you, and really I think that is Black people trying to create a culture that's lasting and really something from nothing. When you look at it, you have a lot of people who are here who are not attached to anything from where they came from. You got people from all over the continent of Africa that are in this country, but they don't know their history, they don't know their culture, they don't know what language their ancestors spoke. And so when we're here, we're creating the culture. You got hip hop, you got all these different things. Some people say rock and roll, I don't know. But it's just like you have this culture that you want to have here, and it's like every time you have something that belongs to that culture, it's seen as being damaging or bad, right? So I think that the Black Lives, I know for a fact, I know for a fact that the Black Lives Matter movement was to call attention to the fact that, hey, our lives aren't being valued, right? And whenever it's met with the response of all lives matter, it's like, did you not hear what I said? Like, are we speaking the same language? Like, Black Lives Matter, like we matter, right? We shouldn't just be killed in the streets or,
In some ways, if that were my response, and I've had that response before, because I'm like, oh, all lives matter. In some ways, does that come across as then I'm minimizing, I'm negating what you're trying to. I
think upon hearing it immediately, yes. I think it's the same as like when you see a rainbow, what do you think of?
Rainbow in the sky?
Or when somebody uses the image of a rainbow logo on a shirt?
If I see it on a shirt, I think of the political connotations to it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
See? So I had this conversation a while back, and I'm talking about the rainbow, and it's just like, that's God's promise, right? It's not the LBGT, whatever. But different people see different things based on, where their headspace is at. And I think that if you're Black, you're probably thinking about being Black a lot of times. And when you hear Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean the same thing. Some people look at the Black Panthers and they see a violent group of people where that's not what it was. That's not what it was meant to be. Now, some people take movements and they make them into things that are not good, but that's not what it was. But I guess it depends on your perspective. But we won't understand perspective unless we have the conversation. So.
What if and we can have a great conversation on this, I believe. If if when something like, we see something like this tragedy that's happened, is what do you want to see from me right away? Is it you want me to race to Facebook and throw up a post? You want me to what could I do as both a white individual and maybe as a white minister? What can I do that to indicate we're together on this?
Right.
What can I do to begin to close this gap that you and I didn't try to create, but it's there just because the way we see different, we view this video differently.
I think that we're doing it. We're having a dialogue right now. We're having a conversation about it. You can't look out. You can't look out into our community, the state, let alone the country, and see a conversation between two people with differing backgrounds, to where they're just talking about, okay, this is what I see, this is what I see. Let's find somewhere where we can meet in the middle. You don't see it, and I think that you Western Hills as a whole, you're doing it. I think that's lovely. Whenever you see the conversation being had on social media, that's a totally different thing, right? Social media is not the place usually where actual conversations happen. People don't converse on social media. They state their opinion, their facts, and then they say, I said what I said, right? On social media, I'll say this. Let's create this scenario. If I live on social media, right, like a lot of people live on social media, and it's my reality, and I make a post, Black Lives Matter, Blackout Tuesday, I think people just want to be affirmed that, hey, I'm with you, I'm praying for you, even if, we're brothers and sisters in Christ. I love you, something to that nature, and not immediately, this is the facts that I know about this, and this is why you're wrong.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't help.
So there's ways that we can affirm relationship, affirm respect for one another, even through the channels of social media.
Oh yeah.
And I'm with you. Social media it's a wild, wild west kind of situation out there, and sometimes it's conversation. It feels like everybody's shouting.
Yeah.
But there's ways to affirm that, but then let that beginning lead into a dialogue.
Yeah.
Lead into an actual conversation.
Yeah.
That in many ways may need to move off of social media to actually be a real dialogue, because let's be honest, conversations and real listening is hard work.
Yeah.
It doesn't come in 140 characters. It doesn't come in a simple tweet or a post, but it comes with people sitting down, whether it be in a workplace, over sharing a lunch together, in our churches, in the barbershop, wherever this is, in all these places, 1,000 different times a day to have these kind of conversations. But I think we've got to walk into it, and this would be my encouragement for myself and for anybody that's white that wants to engage this in a healthy way, that we've got to be better listeners. Because again, you brought so much into my attention that I just had to go, that's not my experience. I've got to stop assuming that my experience is just the same as yours.
Yeah.
So naturally, we should be looking at the same way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people also, they believe that the things that are being shown is created by the media to stir people up. Okay, before Fox News or before CNN, MSNBC, all these things existed, this was a problem. This was a real problem. I think that we have to, we hear narratives that are spoken by political figures that we believe in, and then we say, okay, this is reality, this isn't reality. Let's not believe in this thing when it's a real problem if we just have the conversation, and not just, and I think that there needs to be more than just a conversation on social media. I actually had the time to speak with some different individuals, and I'm just saying, what would you expect to hear or to see as help from your white brothers and sisters, or from people that aren't like you? So I told them that I would share a couple of things.
Yeah, share.
So one thing I have is a teaching children, the next generation. All people are God's people, and there's no one that, we're not different from each other. That's something, as we were talking about earlier, sometimes you have to check your elders, right? Sometimes it happens. Like, you might hear something from grandma or grandpa. They might be like, well, don't trust this person because white people did me this way. No, grandma or grandpa, I'm not raising my kids like that. We see things differently than you did. I know that your experiences are valuable, right? What you have to say is valuable, but hate is hate. Even if it's coming from somebody you love.
And I think that's a powerful one because I connect with that one, because there's part of me wants to go, I know that slavery was bad. I know that all the racism going into the 60s and you talked earlier about Jim Crow and things. I know it's bad, but there's part of me wants to go, but I didn't do that.
Right.
Can we start from a kind of a fresh spot here, And I know that's asking you or somebody that did have these negative experiences to overcome a whole lot, but there is a part of me that does want to say, I get it, but how do we enter into a conversation now? Because that wasn't me, and I don't want to keep repeating that. You know,
and see, now when people, I've been in those conversations and where it's been black people, white people talking, and then they'll say, well, I didn't do that. Don't say that.
Okay.
That turns black people off. They're just like, okay, when you say, well, I didn't do that, it's just like, what they hear is that it's not my problem, right? Now, I think that when we respond to things like that, okay, I'm hearing my brother that happens to be white say that slavery was bad, this was bad, this was bad. I think that exactly the question that you asked, how can I help or what can I do about it? That's better, because what that makes the person on the other side do, instead of feeling this emotion, they're not hearing me out, what it makes them do is think. And I think that's something that I always have to remind people. That's something that I have to remind black people of a lot, is like, we got to think about this thing. Okay, I know it's tied to a history that's hurts, but let's think about this. What is my what is my response going to do to make this a peaceful situation, to bring some unity, right? That's where conversation starts, and that's how we can.
Okay, I want to highlight that because I think there's a takeaway that you just identified for us. I think there's a lot of power in the question, how can I help? And I would say, if we don't hear anything else from this conversation but that, because think about how much, even if it has nothing to do with race, how much we love the question, how can I help? Yeah. Whether it comes from our spouse, our siblings, our coworker, our, somebody that's almost exactly like us, or somebody that's nothing like us, in any context. If you're struggling with something, how can I help? That's a powerful question. And we'll move this transition. I think as Christians, that should be a very natural question to us. How can I help? Yeah. And how can we be? You had some more. I don't want us to
another person's response was hearing, I won't read the whole thing, it's long, but basically they're saying hearing a response from a predominantly white church. Okay. Like a response at all. Like, one thing that I've noticed is you see churches that are predominantly white, and they have a small minority of people in their church, and they just so happen to be black people, and you don't address it at all. That's a problem, I think that's a problem, to not address it at all, because it exists. It's something that they're living through, even if you don't experience it yourself.
So even when you lack perfect answers, just acknowledging that there's a certain pain in the room.
Yeah, even if it's just praying with someone. Like, I had this random guy one time. I was at my part-time job, and a random guy that I did not know, I helped him out to his car with his computer. Okay. He stood there with me, and he prayed for me, praying that my day would go well after our interaction. And that, for me as a Christian, was powerful, because I don't get many people that stop what they're doing to pray for me. I pray for a lot of people, but it's just like, man, that really made me feel like he cared, Like, he didn't know how the rest of my day was going to go. He didn't know how it had went prior to me interacting with him, but for him to stop and just pray with me, that's something, you know,
So,
that made me feel awesome.
Acknowledging, speaking about it, talking about it, praying about it.
Yeah.
Those are ways that, as you formed it, a predominantly white,
I believe so.
which is what Western Hills is, and so there's ways that we can begin. What else?
Somebody said the same thing that we're doing here. Listen to understand. Put out some truths in public. He's saying that it's not a denial and a willing to step out for the cause of Christ. He's saying, like, basically put it on the line. Like we had a conversation earlier. There was somebody in a ministry position that was afraid to speak out on it, right? Because they feared what would happen to their ministry or whatever. Are we willing to put it on the line for our brother or sister that doesn't look like us? Now, I know that everybody isn't going to be willing to do that, because when you look at it in reality, people have bills to pay. People have, you know, they're just like, I don't want to risk my job to speak out and help. It's just like, struggling over here, man. Dying, literally. And I don't know if everybody will be willing to do that, but it's just like showing a love that's like, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice some of my comfort so that you can feel loved. That was one thing. Another one was listening to experiences about race, culture, explain. They put what we just talked about, explaining not to put all lives matter when someone posts Black Lives Matter. This one I thought was really powerful, because you see this a lot. Put politics aside, you know, like not making that number one. And that's one thing that I agree with too. It's just like, I understand, because I've had enough conversations with people who value patriotism and being American. I understand that it's important for some people who, like, they bleed red, white, and blue, right? 4th of July isn't just a day that you barbecue. It means something. You know, Memorial Day, all these things mean something. But when we have the conversation, you start to understand that, okay, if we celebrate these certain things, it doesn't mean the same thing to other people. Like, the 4th of July, for me, doesn't mean the same thing that it does to a veteran, you know, or to someone whose ancestors came to the country voluntarily. Does that make sense? I don't know if it makes sense.
I think, for example, June 19th doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah.
You know, for most of my life, it was the day that followed June 18th.
Yeah.
You know, and not with no reference or an awareness of Juneteenth.
Yeah.
You know, and that celebration comes with the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
So,
The late news of it.
Yeah.
Found out they were free after. Yeah.
Finally made it here. So.
Yeah. So it's just a difference in how we see things, and if we don't talk about it, we won't know. You know.
Well, let's see. Did you have any more? Because I'm going to throw you one more.
That was the responses there that I got back.
Well, let me throw this to you then. You and I, and I know you well enough to know you love the Lord, and you've dedicated your life to serving Him and serving His church, and just, if I hadn't said it already in this broadcast, I love the FUG Church and all that I see is going on there. How does the gospel speak into this situation? Okay, and we'll both answer. Sure, we'll both. But I'm gonna throw it to you first. Yeah, you do, so. Yeah. So this is how I see it. I always tell the folks at Avenue G and whoever watches the live stream, I always say that we need to be Christians first. You know, before I'm a black man, I'm a Christian. Before I'm a father, I'm a Christian. Like, before I'm a husband, I'm a Christian first. Before I'm a certain political party, I'm a Christian. Exactly, because it's like, if I put something over being a Christian and belonging to Christ and being a servant of God, then that's where things begin to get muddy. That's whenever things begin to get, they're not as clear as they should be. Yes, seeing this video of George Floyd, hearing about Ahmaud Arbery, thinking about what happened to Michael Dean, that upsets and that angers me to the core, you know?
But I have to respond as a Christian should respond to these things. I'm not saying that the Bible should be used as a pacifier to keep black people in check or whatever. What I'm saying is that God has already torn down the wall of hostility, the thing that separates race, gender, all of that. God has already made it to where we are one unified people in Christ. Let's not build up a culture wall. Let's not build up a race wall. Let's not build up a gender wall, you know, because as I'm looking at this also, I think that it's necessary for us to, we gotta just be entrenched in this thing of conversation and seeing how other people think. I think that God gave me daughters. And I'm about to go off on a tangent here. I think that God gave me daughters because I did not have a good understanding of females in general, right? I was all about being a rah-rah dude, right? Having daughters made me begin to look into, okay, I do the research. When my first daughter was born, I already knew what I wanted her to be. You know, I'm like, okay, she's gonna be smart like her mama. She's gonna hopefully she'll have some athletic talent so I can cheer for something. She's gonna do these things. But then I started looking at these things and I'm just like, wait a minute. Women do a job that is equal, if not better than a man, and they still earn less money. You know, they have to worry about what they're wearing so that somebody doesn't shame them if they're attacked or something. It's just like, man, they have a lot to be concerned with on top of being mothers, on top of being wives. And it's just like, if I wouldn't have had the experience of being surrounded by women in my household, then I don't understand that. And I probably wouldn't choose to go and look into those things. I think that having my daughters, you know, I love my wife, but I think that having my daughters made me treat her better, you know? And
again, growing up as a female, experiences and understanding that's a different perspective than growing up as a
and the more they grow, the more I'm saying, okay, maybe that's why my wife might think this way or that way, because I'm seeing it through them, and now I'm able to better understand her through them, if that makes sense, you know. So I think that the gospel gives us also an outlet. There are a lot of people who right now are involved with the looting, the violence that's happening at these protests. They start off as peaceful protests, and then somebody somewhere chooses to do something violent. I think that these are troubled people. These are the people, like, I don't know if you were this type of kid in elementary school or middle school, but I was the type of kid, I got into altercations. I was in ISS quite a bit, you know, sometimes growing up. And when you had a fight, somebody would go and they would place a stick on somebody's shoulder. And then if the other person knocked it off, right, then that means that, okay, I'm upset as you are upset and let's fight, right? There are people who are the stick layers, right? And they see something that is about to happen and they'll lay the stick on the shoulder, but they wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight, right? They just love to see bad stuff happen.
They want to stir it up. They just want to stir it up and see
exactly, right? There are people who do not know how to handle their anger and their frustration. And I believe that the gospel, I believe that God gives us an outlet to handle it. Christians have that. I believe that God gives us a way to where we can see things that happen like this, and we have an outlet to where we can dump all of these emotions that we're feeling there with God. I believe we can leave it there with God. I believe that we can still exist because we've done it. We can still exist and have joy in times like this with God. I think that's what God offers. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's what I believe.
You know, Chris, I like what you said about the gospel provides a different outlet. And I think that's a powerful one, and I hadn't thought about that. But this idea that there's lots of rage, there's lots of violence, these riots that we're seeing in these various cities. I mean, cities on fire and burning. The gospel does provide a different response, an alternative outlet for that. And I like the word outlet. And I'm going to come in and say it's so powerful that there's no amount of rage and rioting and violence that's going to remove the poison that you said built up from the history. Here we go again.
Right.
It doesn't answer it. Now, we can light all kinds of things on fire, but it's not going to solve it. But the gospel,
it has an answer.
as you said, it can take down that wall of hostility. Mm-hmm. And not only can take down the wall of hostility that's between you and I, but the one that's in my heart, and begins with me just as an individual, and then my world and my family and all that. And it has the power to actually do something about the rage and the violent response and the anger and the bitterness that's in my heart. It is a cure for that. And when you think about what Jesus endured, his experience on the cross, he was the recipient of everything unjust.
Right.
And we all threw everything at him we could. And now he is not just an example of how to bear up under that, but he's the means by which we can bear up on that. And that has far more hope than any type of violent response. Right. Because that was Jesus saying, I'm with you in this. I know. Talking about coming from experience. He stepped into the whole mess and did that. And that's just incredible. And
so what would you say to this? How does the gospel also help us with understanding?
Okay, that's a powerful one.
Because the reason why I ask is this is because we have a God that is perfect, and yet he understands people that are fallible, right? Mm-hmm. How does the gospel help us to understand others?
A couple thoughts.
Okay.
First of all, I think there is a sense, because of what he endured, both through his life and ultimately his execution, is there's not really a human event that we can point to God and say, well, you just don't understand. Mm-hmm. You haven't experienced whatever. Again, everything from poverty to betrayal to brutality to death. He experienced the range, of human experience and human emotion. So there's not one we can look at and say, if you would only understand God, if you'd experience this, then that would be something. But through that, I think there's an understanding that can come, not that I have to go out and experience every single thing.
Right.
That's going to be a strange pursuit. If I'm going to fully be friends with Chris, I've got to have every experience Chris has had before we can even have a dialogue. Mm-hmm. But if you and I both serve one that's had, you see now, and I think there is something powerful about this, and I'm going to try to choose my words carefully because I don't want to seem like minimizing, but the focus is not on you, and it's not on me.
Okay.
And together we're being drawn closer because of the one that we both serve, the one that you and I, not the world, but you and I would say he's the king.
Okay.
And now we're not. I'm not foremost a citizen of America. I'm a citizen. We're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Together. And so now when I look at you, I'm looking at a fellow citizen. All rights, responsibilities, and things like that we now can figure out together. Okay, how do we make the experience that you and I know to be true, the kingdom, the reality of heaven, the reality of the walls being taken down, how do we now together help that be revealed in the everyday world that we live in? That's just some of my thoughts. What do you
I agree with it. I think that with the wall of hostility, it's gone, and God has made a way for us all to be unified, regardless of anything else. Let's work on figuring out a way to keep it that way. To
experience it that way.
Yeah, I think we got to be intentional with it, making sure, kind of like what we're doing here. What Avenue G and Western Hills Church of Christ have done with the combined worship services, that's something that's intentional. We intentionally do that, and we're tearing down walls and we're making sure that they stay down. of making sure that it's a consistent thing that's happening. I think we got to be intentional with it outside of the church building as well. You know.
Well, here's what I know. I know that Western Hills is blessed, and I've been blessed by our relationship.
Likewise.
And that means so much. And if this is and I don't even call it a starting place, because I think God's been leading us down this journey, but I love that we're still on this journey together, and not, we're not going to pretend like it's all done, but that we're still moving forward. You talked about prayer earlier and the power of it. Would you close this out?
Most definitely.
Would you wrap us with a prayer and just a blessing for what God is doing, and as we try to go forward faithfully in this current environment?
Yeah,
okay.
We can do that.
Please.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We understand that there are some who are listening and watching at this time who have had days that may not be worth remembering, but we're thankful for it anyhow. We ask that you would bless us to make the most of our days that you have given us, and we ask that you bless us to be intentional about our unity that you have blessed us with. We ask that you would bless our hearts to not hold on to a history of hate. We ask that you would bless us to be intentional about listening and understanding each other. We ask that you would bless us to be mindful of our priority to push the gospel. And we ask that you keep it ever present on our hearts to make that a priority. We ask that you bless both our congregations, from the youngest to the oldest, that we can be unified regardless of age. We ask that you would bless our leaders at this time. We ask that you would touch them and influence them in a way that would bring some semblance of peace. We ask that you would continue again to bless us to be the conduits of change, and we ask that you would bless us to look towards you for our peace, for our hope. All these things we ask in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, Chris, this has been powerful for me. I'm honored that you would consider me a friend. It's a great blessing. This conversation, we didn't begin to pretend that we're going to have all the answers in it, but we do want to keep the conversation going. So Chris and I are going to keep doing things like this as the opportunities present themselves. And we're also available for you to be in dialogue with us. Yeah. And because we really do want to encourage that. And so shoot us your questions on social media. Come up and talk to us if you see us out in the community or at one of our churches. And and let's keep talking. So last thoughts?
Just thank you for watching. And let's be mindful of who we are.
Grace and peace.
Thank you.